This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, losses in Asian markets today pushed MSCI's index of emerging market stocks 0.5% lower. However, the index still ended the week about 1.8% higher. Now, investors are encouraged by assurances from the U.S. Fed Chair, Jerome Powell, that policy will stay accommodative going forward. In South Africa, the JSE remained pretty weak for a second day as local focus remained on damaged businesses and, of course, infrastructure caused by civil unrest and its effect on the economy. Meanwhile, Kenya's NSE All Share hitting a 39-month high today on the back of a rally in Safaricom and Equity Bank stocks. And also coming up on today's show, the IMF approves $1.5 billion extended credit facility loan and pushes for fiscal and monetary reforms. South Sudan allocates 5,000 crude oil barrels per day to pay for public servant salaries. And Prime Minister Boris Johnson rolls out post-COVID economic vision for the UK. Well, tonight we start off in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The International Monetary Fund has approved a 3-year $1.5 billion loan under the extended credit facility. Now, the financing package is set to support DRC's structural reform agenda aimed at promoting sustainable economic growth, as well as strengthening its governance and reinforcing monetary policy. Approval of the ECF arrangement will enable immediate disbursement of an estimated $217 million to reinforce international reserves. Now, the DRC may also be eligible for another $1.5 billion loan later this year. That's all part of a general allocation to IMF member states in response to the global slump, of course, caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's find out more about this program. We're joined by Chris Ochamringa, who's joining us in Kinshasa. Great to have you with us on the show today, Chris. Now, of course, this program, which is the first for the country in almost 10 years, it is expected to increase fiscal space for social programs and, of course, security spending in the country going forward. So take us through how effective these funds will be in helping the country's economy recover from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, Uchi, so the COVID-19 pandemic has had a very serious, devastating impact on the DRC's economy. In 2019, the country's economic growth was at 4.4%, according to the World Bank. But then last year, it dropped to 0.8%. And so there was a very big effect on especially people in the informal sector and people who are in the non-mining sectors, because this country has very few industries, and so they import a lot of products from abroad. They have to buy them in dollars. There was a lot of inflation right after the pandemic, and that is why the government has agreed with the IMF that they're going to set about $217 million into the international foreign reserves. Now, what this means is that the DRC officials have agreed with the World Bank that they are going to do certain things, like you mentioned, in improving the mobilization of domestic revenue, which will in turn supposed to improve on the government spending in areas like roads, railways, and also in the social welfare, salaries of people. There are very many Congolese who have gone for months without salaries, and so this money is supposed to help in those areas. Now, as far as helping the pandemic, you know, people's lives improve from the pandemic, it's likely to have a big impact if, and that's a big if, the government sticks to what it said that it would do with the IMF, specifically improving the domestic revenue collection, focusing on collecting taxes, and making sure that they go to the intended purposes, because this country has had a history of corruption. And so if they stick to what they said they will do with the IMF, then it's certainly going to improve the economy of the country.
Well, speaking of what the government said it will do, the program also includes a number of government commitments, including repaying VAT arrears owed to mining firms, also publishing new mining contracts going forward. What has been the reactions to those commitments put forward by the IMF that the government has to fulfill? And of course, thoughts on the government's ability to carry them out?
Well, the IMF has always been urging the DRC government to stick to these, auditing the papers of these foreign companies and ensuring that there's transparency. The DRC government has had a lot of battles with the foreign mining companies in this country, right from the time of former President Joseph Kabila, because there was a new mining code introduced last year, which many of these mining firms were opposed to because they were supposed to pay more taxes to the DRC government. And so now the IMF is saying that there has to be some revision in some of these things. This is going to be a very controversial issue because there are very many firms that have been, saying that they will take this matter to higher authorities if, their mining contracts are revised. The DRC president earlier this last month was at a conference where he said that they will review some of these mining contracts of these companies. These companies have invested a lot of money and it's long-term investment. And so they're not going to accept this kind of changes lying down. Uche?
Now, interestingly, one of the other conditions set by the IMF was an in-depth reform of the Banque Centrale du Congo, which is Congo Central Bank. It includes a reshuffling of the board, long-time members leaving, a new CEO from the IMF, and of course plans to modernize the central bank structure going forward. Take us through that reform program and certainly how it will change the status quo going forward. Hi, can you hear me, Chris? Well, it certainly looks like we may have lost Chris Ochamaringa there. We'll certainly try to get him back later on in the show. In the meantime, let's move on now to South Africa. The country's manufacturing production declined in May for a second month in a row. According to Statistics South Africa, the sector was down 2.6% from April. Now, the industry was showing steady growth since lockdown restrictions were eased last year. But with a severe third wave of COVID causing a rise in infections, activity has been limited. Rioting and looting in parts of the country is also expected to severely impact the manufacturing industry going forward. Here's Sumitra Naidu with more.
The ongoing looting in South Africa's Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal provinces is a major setback for the economy. The manufacturing industry is the second largest employer in South Africa. It is already feeling the impacts of the rioting related to former President Jacob Zuma's jailing last week. A number of big factories and warehouses have been burnt, machinery and equipment destroyed or stolen.
The manufacturing sector, as you rightly note, is a fundamentally important component of our economy. It's really the engine of growth for our economy. It employs a significant amount of people. Last quarterly labour force statistics, just over 1.5 million employees, contributes approximately 11% to our GDP.
Manufacturing is very important in the context of a country like ours, a developing economy with high levels of unemployment. Needs sectors like manufacturing because of the multiplier effect that manufacturing has on the different variables that are linked to manufacturing.
Petrol stations inland are running dry after a major oil refinery suspended operations this week. The demand for fuel is likely to push inflation up. Rising input costs are also likely to delay a full recovery in the manufacturing sector.
It will massively affect, as I said, supply chains. You have to move the goods to the market, and you also have to move the raw materials to the production base. So that is a major significant issue that at play now. We've also seen disruptions slightly coming in from the transport service business. Most of the trucks have now been kept on the bay. because of the security concerns.
Meanwhile, COVID is still hampering efforts to ramp up production. Thousands are dying from the more severe Delta variant. The recent move to tougher lockdown restrictions will reverse some of the gains.
If you look at the year-on-year change, manufacturing was up by about 35.3% in May compared to May last year. So on a year-on-year basis, numbers were positive, although the outcome was slightly below our expectations. So we had expected 40% year-on-year, and Bloomberg Consensus had an expectation of 46% year-on-year.
According to Stats SA, 6 out of 10 subsectors under manufacturing showed growth in the first quarter of this year, suggesting a more positive outlook. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And adding to Uganda now, the country's coffee exports have hit a record high of 6 million coffee bags, which is the highest total exports recorded in a single year in 3 decades. Now, latest figures from the state-run Uganda Coffee Development Authority show the country earned close to $600 million in June 2021, and that's compared to about $495 million last year. Here's CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga with more.
Uganda is beginning to see a payoff in coffee exports. The country's Coffee Development Agency recorded a 19% increase in exports in June this year. The rise in exports is attributed to the newly planted coffee trees, which have started to yield, supported by favorable weather.
The revenues from coffee has been largely from Robusta, because that's where we have had big increases. We have been, in this financial year, we've been in a fry crop.
Coffee promoters say the rise in prices at the global level have also encouraged exporters to release their stock. Much of Uganda's coffee is going to Europe, but the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions are slowing down the coffee trade. Uganda has been under lockdown for a month now, and transporting coffee out of the farm is now a challenge.
Most of the farmers are stuck with a lot of stock from the previous harvest, and that affects them because that is an entire chain. How are they going to pay all these workers? Because workers still have to harvest that coffee. Workers still have to do the entire thing. How are they going to pay them? Because even us that are buying coffee from them, the market demand is not something that we expected.
Uganda's target is to produce more than 20 million bags by 2035. The country's coffee agency is hopeful that it could see an increase in coffee exports, driven by the increasing global coffee prices because of a reduced harvest from Brazil and Vietnam, who are the top coffee producers. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And still in Uganda, there are fears amongst traders there over the risk of cash spreading COVID-19. In a sector where people rely heavily on physical currency for transactions, there are now concerns that the money they're handling could be spreading the virus, despite health experts saying the risk is low. Here's Leon Senyange reporting from Kampala.
Health experts say diseases like COVID-19 can be transmitted off surfaces that have been touched by an infected person.
It stays longer on the surfaces, so usually you pick it from there and then put it on yourself.
Such surfaces can include money, and that's worrying traders that notes are super spreaders.
If he gives me money, then I just put it in the basket. By the time I'm done with collecting all the money at the end of the day, and I forget to wash my hands, I go and serve another customer or I do something else. Then at the end of the day, if someone had COVID and I got the money, I can also end up getting it, and the transmission spreads faster.
To keep safe, Joanna Wori sanitizes her hands and money regularly. According to health experts, the possibility of contracting COVID-19 through money remains low. Despite such assurances, the guidance has been to wash and sanitize your hands after touching any surface. The measures are being taken seriously in places like these, where cash changes hands from customers to shopkeepers frequently.
We are supposed to be washing all the time. You wash because you never know if you touch the hand of somebody who is already infected, and then you go ahead touching others, even to yourself, you can be infected.
The concern on handling money has sped up the shift into another mode of payment. Cashless payments are now more common than before. While that is a safer practice, a large segment of customers in Uganda still heavily rely on cash payments for commodities. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And now to some corporate headlines. The International Finance Corporation has invested $1.2 million in a 5-year corporate bond issued by the Tanzania Mortgage Refinance Company. Now, this is all part of its strategy to make longer-term affordable mortgages and housing accessible in the country. The issuance is expected to ease pressure on limited public sector funds, with the Tanzania Mortgage Refinance Company expected to rely less on a government funding and more on private sector funds. Meanwhile, Linkham Group has announced the completion of its acquisition of a majority stake in Resolution Insurance Kenya. The investment is expected to focus on quality customer service delivery, adopting cutting-edge technologies and risk management practices. Linkham Group has also confirmed Peter Nduati as the new Resolution Insurance Kenya Chief Executive Officer with immediate effect. And Chinese smartphone maker Xiaomi has become the second largest smartphone maker in the second quarter, overtaking Apple. Now, Xiaomi had a 17% share of global smartphone shipments, ahead of Apple's 14% and behind Samsung's 19%. Well, Xiaomi also posted year-on-year smartphone shipment growth of 83% versus 15% for Samsung and just 1% for Apple. And finally, Delta Airlines has posted a $652 million net income in the second quarter of 2021. The carrier says it expects to stay in the black for the rest of the fiscal year. It also attributes the profit to billions of dollars in government aid, a vaccination-led travel rebound, as well as a strong rise in quarterly revenues. Delta's second quarter adjusted operating revenue fell 49% from 2019 to $6.35 billion compared to a 60.4% slump in the first quarter. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still to come. South Sudan allocates 5,000 crude oil barrels per day to pay for public servants' salaries. And US-based corporation to construct the largest petrochemicals complex.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra.
Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back. Now, South Sudanese President Salva Kiir has allocated 5,000 barrels of crude oil per day to pay civil servant salaries. The government is struggling to pay its workers regularly as the country's dire economic situation continues to worsen due to inflation and a reduction in oil production. Here's CGTN's Patrick Oyet reporting.
South Sudan's economy depends on exports of oil, effects of civil war, COVID-19 and aging oil fields led to a reduction in oil production from 320,000 barrels a day to the current levels of just over 150,000 barrels a day. That has meant that revenue has also fallen, leading to civil servants here not being paid for months. The government now says it wants to allocate 5,000 barrels of oil every day for salaries of civil servants.
I am aware that our civil servants are not being paid on time, and they have endured irregular salary payments for a long time. I'm also aware that salary scales have not been reviewed since we realigned our currency in 2015.
However, the problem here is not just a regular salary payment. Inflation means the highest paid civil servant salary in the country is just $40.
Civil servants have not been receiving that good money. For instance, our soldiers used to receive some small amount of money, like 1,000 pounds for a private gun. But now that the money has been increased to by 100%, I think this money will help them.
People have to have salaries, good money, so that they afford things that are inside the market, things that are being sold, even school fees and all that. So to me, it's a good idea, and I'd like to congratulate the president on that. And another thing, I hope that it will be implemented.
They pay us very less money. We cannot even manage to pay the school fees. So now, I think if it's do it like that, so it will be better for us all.
The South Sudanese president says his government plans to increase salaries of civil servants by 100%. The government says the first salary adjustment will be made when the new budget is in place. Passing that budget, however, awaits the new parliament expected to be sworn in this month. The government says it plans to use the oil money allocated to salaries to improve civil servants' pay in phases. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Meanwhile, Egypt has signed 2 agreements with the US-based Bechtel Corporation for the design and construction of the largest petrochemicals complex in Africa. The refinery will cost about $7.5 billion and will be located on the Red Sea's Ain Sokna economic zone. From Cairo, here's Yasser Hakim with the details.
The deals with the US-based company Bechtel, in partnership with Egypt's state-owned petroleum engineering companies MP and Petrojet, require them to prepare the engineering and design work for the petrochemicals project. It will also form the coalition that will construct the mega complex in Ain Sokna economic zone on the Red Sea.
We have always suffered from the availability of petrochemical products that are used in many industries. We import 90% of polyethylene and other products at billions of dollars annually. But with the natural gas discovered lately, the country is now able to produce petroleum products using natural gas.
The factory will produce polyethylene, polypropylene, polyester, and ship fuel and other products as well. They will be used in several industries, such as fertilizers and detergents. There are 9 petrochemical plants in Egypt, and 2 are under construction. The largest is Al Tahrir complex, to be built by Bechtel.
The Al Tahrir complex in Ain Sokna that will be ready in 2024 will produce 4 million tons of petrochemicals for the local market and for export, ranking about $8 billion worth of exports per year. The strategy is to revert to added value projects by manufacturing petroleum products and petrochemicals that would reduce imports, especially fuel and diesel, which to date are a big burden on the state budget.
Egypt's petroleum products import bill has dropped from $9.4 billion to $6.3 billion in the last year. The North African country plans to reach self-sufficiency in this sector by 2023. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, climate change has led some farmers in Kenya to change the crops they grow to ensure adequate earnings and harvests. Some have been forced to stop growing the crops they had relied on for many years due to persistent challenges. While CGTN's Nick Mudimba caught up with a farmer who is enjoying the benefits of switching to fruit cultivation.
Kenya's North Rift has been known for many years as a leading producer of maize, but many farmers there are abandoning growing that crop. Dr. Nesmas Ngetich is a farmer and a university lecturer. He quit maize farming due to the difficulties he faced and is now fully focused on fruit farming.
We are currently in the, trying to spread the message of diversification because of the opportunities that most of these other plants give to farmers in terms of income. Corn production has been declining over years, and many growers have experienced a decline in production from maybe 30 bags an acre to 15 and like that. So, and then also the market prices and the free, market for the importers. That one has brought down the cost of the prices of maize.
The transition has given Dr. Ngetich financial freedom in ways he didn't expect. He's growing a variety of fruits at his farm and is now more focused on selling fruit tree seedlings so as to encourage other farmers to emulate him.
Fruit production gives a big opportunity, both for local and for international market. The prices of fruits in the market, the common market, is good, it's high, especially for growers. Because if you produce for avocados, for apples, for papaya, for, name them, passion fruits, tree tomatoes, their prices are relatively higher.
His new venture has placed him on the international map as more farmers across Africa and beyond are ordering for seedlings. But the demand, according to him, is overwhelming at times.
A client in Ghana who requires 250,000 runners of strawberries. But currently, we tell them we are still supplying other places. Of course, we are trying to bulk and probably provide. So there's an opportunity. So there's an opportunity in production and also in the nursery.
As a farmer, he wants to engage in sustainable farming that will also address nutritional needs of the local population.
He's been able to cater for his family and for himself, and also he's been able to pay more than 5 workers to maintain the gardens. Right now, his main focus is to go higher and, of course, increase the acreage of his fruit farming. For now, he's happy with what he's got, and, of course, productivity is his endgame. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Uasin Gishu County, Kenya.
Now, low-income earners in Nigeria are finding it increasingly difficult to afford drinking water. This follows a recent hike in the price of packaged sachet water that is popular amongst its citizens. While consumers have complained about the price increase, manufacturers are also struggling to cope with the rising cost of production. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reporting.
Moses Ikenokan owns and runs this sachet water factory in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. After 8 years of operation, his business has gained traction, with average sales of 300 bags daily. But the cost of production has continued to soar, so despite the high demand, profit has been low.
The cost of producing water is on the increase daily. Because if you look at the materials we are using, the prices is also increasing from the places we are buying them from. Talk of the machineries. Machine we used to buy, those days we started at the rate of 350, is now 1.1 million. Now the materials we are using, if you look at the packing bag, the ordinary bag we use in packaging it after producing it, where we have those 20, then you can lift it up. We are buying it today at 7,000. Even the price of pure water is supposed to be more than what it is today if actually we really want to make or maximize profit.
Sachet water is a staple for many Nigerians. That's because it's relatively cheap. So many in the urban and suburban areas find it an alternative to bottled water, which comes at nearly 10 times the price. But now the price of sachet water has more than doubled.
Formerly, we used to buy a bag of pure water 15 naira, but now because of COVID-19, we bought it 100 naira. I beg the federal government and the Nigeria as a whole that they should help us and at least to reduce the price of things. In fact, not only pure water, in all areas of the food items, in fact, so that we can able to live well.
The price increases persist despite Nigeria's inflation rate falling for the second month in a row to 17.93% in May from 18.12% in April. This drop has not helped prices go down.
It has grave implications, because we're already seeing tension, we're already seeing increase in insecurity, we're already seeing high level of criminality, we're already seeing sudden deaths. There's stress in the land, people are suffering. When an economy like ours is on a tailspin, you expect that those low-income earners will most likely suffer it more. And that's why calls have been made severally that government should continue with measures, that will cushion their plight.
Millions of households in Nigeria still lack access to clean water sources. The UN's children's agency UNICEF says 3 in every 10 persons cannot access clean water. Economic watchers say issues like this indicate the urgency to revive Nigeria's battered economy. And economic recovery would mean focusing more on diversifying the country's economy. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And the Somali Trade Show held a trade expo for youth with exceptional entrepreneurial skills to showcase their talent. The event in Mogadishu was organized to commemorate the just concluded World Youth Skills Day.
14-year-old high school student Abdullahi Abdurrahman Mohammed was the youngest participant at this year's trade show held at the Banadir Youth Center in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. Mohammed aspires to be an architect, and today he has presented a 2-story building he designed and named the School of Innovation.
Today, I presented this project at the Somali Trade Show. I have designed other projects thanks to the information I got from YouTube videos, but this is my own design. Everything you see today is my idea. It is called the School of Innovation because it will house 18 classes, 6 stores and 8 offices. I had the passion since I was 7 years old.
Farhiya Muhyiddin Mohammed returned to Somalia from the UAE where she lived for 6 months. At the Somali Trade Show, she presented her unique business idea on the candle.
For the past few days, we committed ourselves to source employment opportunities for our youth. We have been trying to secure investment opportunities for youth with entrepreneurship skills to give us the chance to invest in the youth who presented their talents here today.
The trade show was a platform for the business community to share ideas for a nation seeking support to establish a conducive investment climate that could boost the national economy. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now. Still to come. Prime Minister Boris Johnson rolls out post-COVID economic vision for the UK. And the Asian Development Bank urges Asian nations to embrace digital services.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, a recap of today's top headlines. In South Africa, the death toll from the unrest in the country has shot up to 212 people. President Cyril Ramaphosa on Thursday visited the province of KwaZulu-Natal, which has been one of the flashpoints of violence this past week. Now, his visit comes as relative calm returns to parts of the country that were reporting sporadic violence. However, police say looting is still ongoing in some areas. The unrest was, of course, sparked by the arrest and detention of former President Jacob Zuma, but has since widened into socio-economic grievances. Meanwhile, Senegal has been posting an unprecedented surge in COVID-19 infections. On Wednesday, 733 new cases were reported, with a positivity rate of over 25%. The previous record was 529 cases reported on Sunday. Now, concerns have been raised ahead of the Islamic Eid al-Adha festival, locally known as Tabaski, in which large gatherings are expected. And in Europe, record rainfall and flooding have left at least 125 people dead and over 1,000 missing. Record rainfall caused rivers to burst their banks, devastating the region. In Germany, where the death toll now stands at over 100, Chancellor Angela Merkel called for a determined battle against climate change. At least 20 people have died in Belgium. The Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Switzerland are also affected. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Now look at some international news. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has vowed not to immobilize London and other tall poppies. This follows imposing of his flagship Levelling Up programme, which the government's post-COVID economic vision for the UK. Here's Juliet Mann with more on that story.
If much of your local shopping parade looks like this, the UK government's regeneration plans will appeal. Light on detail, the Prime Minister's vow to level up is his big picture vision to restore pride in left-behind areas of the country and ultimately stoke economic growth.
So, levelling up is not a jam-spreading operation. It's not robbing Peter to pay Paul, it's not zero-sum, it's win-win for the whole United Kingdom. And so this is the plan. And I will believe that we've made progress on levelling up when we've begun to raise living standards, spread opportunity, improved our public services, and restored people's sense of pride in their community across the whole of the UK.
Speaking from a battery factory in the West Midlands was a nod to his ambition to turn the country into a science superpower with high-tech, high-wage jobs. He pledged to give local leaders the tools they need to make things happen.
Now is the time to do even better. And there is one final ingredient. The most important factor in levelling up. The yeast that lifts the whole mattress of dough, the magic sauce, the ketchup of catch-up. And that is leadership.
The opposition Labour Party described the Prime Minister's speech as gibberish nonsense. The party's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, called it a PR exercise. But making pavement licences for pubs and cafes permanent is one way to back business and boost community pride. More policy detail will be announced in the autumn. The Prime Minister talked about getting the basics right, investing in grassroots sport, upgrading transport, cutting crime and making the whole country more attractive to investment. What he didn't talk about was how much he's planning on spending or where the funds will come from to pay for it all. And levelling up needs money to back it up. Juliet Mann, CGTN, London.
And moving on now, the leaders of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation have examined the region's economic response during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this comes as the disease weighs heavily on cross-border trade and inbound investment in Asia. The Asian Development Bank says Asian nations should enhance digital services and unlock the potential of digital trade. It further adds that there is a need to improve telecom access, logistics infrastructure, more e-payment options, as well as improve regulation. Now, the report also highlighted regional cooperation for sustainable economic recovery. The ADB believes that free trade agreements like the RCEP can deepen regional integration and boost foreign investment laws. Meanwhile, European businesses have registered a strong performance in China despite the pandemic. Several companies are now planning to increase their investment in the country. CGTN's Meng Chilshang has more.
The EU Chamber of Commerce in China's Business Confidence Survey shows nearly 42% of its 600 respondents experienced growth last year. And while nearly a quarter of respondents saw revenue declines last year, 75% turned a profit, the same proportion seen over the past 5 years.
First and foremost, credit needs to be given to the Chinese government for the very strong and quick measures it took to contain the COVID-19 outbreak. It was very tough during the first few months, but it paid off as business was able to come back online much sooner than has been the case in many other countries.
New figures show China's GDP has grown by 12.7% year-on-year in the first half of 2021. As the business survey shows, 68% of European companies in China are optimistic about future growth, a 20 percentage point increase from last year.
Our companies are more optimistic than they have been in the last 5 years. 56% plan to invest more. 5 times as many companies plan to onshore than to offshore. And fewer companies are leaving China than they ever have before.
The survey also examines impacts from geopolitical tensions. It says companies are looking for ways to decrease their exposure to such issues, particularly possible cross-border disruptions like the trade war. The findings also say over 40% of respondents reported market access barriers and unequal treatment.
Because of national security concerns here in China, there are requirements now that a lot of IT products are manufactured and certified by Chinese companies. So some of our European companies that previously sourced their materials, their IT, their software, their hardware from other European companies in China actually now feel that they need to source it from Chinese companies because of these policies.
The Chamber explained European companies are not decoupling by leaving China, but instead are considering which cross-border ties between China operations and global ones can and must be cut.
Organizers of the survey say European companies have both contributed to and benefited from China's strong and speedy economic recovery. If given the right opportunities, they're ready to deepen their positions and help drive China's industrial upgrade as well as overall growth. 孟庆生 CGTN 成都四川 Province.
Now, China's national carbon trading market has opened today, part of the country's efforts to reach carbon neutrality by 2060. Trading began at the Shanghai Environment and Energy Exchange. The initial stage covers just the power sector. Online transactions involve over 2,000 companies, and the plan for a nationwide carbon market in China was announced a decade ago. 7 cities were then selected as the pilot zones for carbon trading. Our reporter Gao Ang explains how this scheme works.
Carbon trading. Now, what's behind the buzzword? It's been described as a system aimed at reducing greenhouse gases cost-effectively. But how does it work? Like any form of trade, it happens between a buyer and a seller. Imagine 2 enterprises, A and B, join the carbon emissions trading scheme. They each get an allowance from the government, also known as carbon units. If Enterprise A cuts down more carbon emissions than expected, it will have a surplus of units. If Enterprise B struggles to reduce emissions, it could use more units. A and B can then buy and sell units to each other. Like a stock exchange, carbon unit prices vary depending on market supply and demand. The Shanghai Environment and Energy Exchange is in charge of building China's carbon market trading system. They tell us more about how the scheme works.
The total emission scales covered by the power generation industry is very large, so the entire carbon pricing mechanism will guide the allocation of more energy-saving and emission reduction resources in future, and will also promote more incentives for enterprises to adopt clean energy and low-carbon technology projects. So it's a very good market-oriented tool for us as a whole.
In its first phase, the market covers over 2,000 power companies and plants across China. They are responsible for about 4 billion tons of carbon emissions each year, making China the biggest carbon market, surpassing the EU.
Our market has just started. It should be a process of gradual exploration and improvement. We'll also learn more advanced international experience, including some early experiences in local markets, to continuously improve our carbon market.
Since 2011, pilot markets have been set up in 7 provinces and cities, including Beijing and Shanghai. In the early stages of the national market, financial institutions or individual investors will not be allowed to participate. But as soon as the trading mechanism matures, officials say institutional investors will be included. Gang, CGTN, Shanghai.
Now, over in Mexico, the global semiconductor shortage is causing problems for several industries, with the automobile industry the hardest hit. Chip makers are now looking to diversify their manufacturing operations. Computer and other electronics industries are also amongst the affected sectors. Here's CGTN's Alistair Beverstock reporting.
Josue Franco is an electrical engineer in Mexico, running his own electronics repair business. He may have been able to reopen his shop recently as pandemic protocols eased, but now facing the global shortage of semiconductor chips, the hard times continue.
Semiconductor chips are very important in microelectronics, given that they receive, protect, and distribute power to the rest of the system. There is simply no computing without them.
While small businesses like Josue's may be struggling, one of Mexico's biggest industrial sectors is hurting too. Mexico's automotive industry is this country's largest export sector, and the shortage of semiconductor chips has caused assembly line delays and stoppages, leading to output shortfalls and worker pay cuts. Indeed, one of the world's biggest car manufacturers, Volkswagen, has its largest plant outside of Germany here, which has faced repeated stoppages since the start of the year. For workers at the plant, there's no end in sight.
More than 3,000 of our union members have been affected by these technical stoppages, and while the industry gives us estimates of when there will be a return to full-time work, there's no certainty.
However, given the weakened links in the current global supply chain, Mexico's Industrial Association sees potential opportunity in this crisis.
Fabricación de semiconductores está concentrado en Asia.
The majority of these chip manufacturers are in Asia, and since the US and China may continue to have commercial tensions, this is a golden opportunity for Mexico. Industry clients are now asking for their suppliers to be closer to their manufacturing operations, and for the US market, Mexico is the best option. So we must work to attract this regionalization of semiconductor chip manufacture.
Many analysts say the shortage does indeed point to a need for the industry to diversify its manufacturing. Mexico, with a solid background in electronics production, is hoping to step into a greater supply role. Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, Puebla, Mexico.
And on that note, let's take a look at commodity markets today. Coffee prices continue to skyrocket, climbing over 2% today as a drought in Brazil, coupled with an increase in demand for coffee as the world reopens, caused the cost of Arabica coffee beans to hit their highest level since 2016. Meanwhile, oil prices, little change today, but they are still heading for their biggest weekly drop since March. That's after supply concerns spooked investors. Of course, OPEC is likely to add more barrels amid expectations that demand is returning as more countries recover from the pandemic. Gold prices remaining subdued today by pressure from a firmer dollar. Well, let's take a short break now, still coming up on the show. An incubator project spurs the growth of women startups in Tunisia.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Nigeria,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, in Tunisia, an incubation program dedicated to help women has led to the creation of thousands of startups in the country. The program, which was launched in Tunisia late last year, targeted a specific segment of women researchers and senior scientific entrepreneurs. From Tunis, here's CGTN's Adnan Shaushi with the details.
9 women scientists and researchers were selected from a total of 103 candidates from Tunisia's 12 regions in the incubation program. Their startups consist of a digital platform of services dedicated to people with disabilities and a digital platform of data collection and analysis in agriculture, as well as a clinical research center for breast cancer.
This project shows that women can be successful in the business and entrepreneurial field. They can create and manage companies in different sectors. The Tunisian economy needs a valuable contribution of women in order to create a modern economy and society.
Senior Women in Business program also includes a project for the production of natural dyes for the agri-food and aquaculture industries, a startup developing innovative digital systems dedicated to masking disruptive noise in the workplace, and a startup producing wastewater recovery solutions.
Supporting women business leadership is our priority. Women entrepreneurs are behind the new dynamic in the national economy. Unfortunately, despite the efforts made by women, their contribution to the economy stands at only 26.5% over the last 10 years. This is a considerable obstacle to women's economic empowerment.
The Minister of Women, Family and Seniors added that the COVID-19 pandemic took its toll on women's businesses and startups.
Thousands of businesses owned by women were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's the state's responsibility to help them. We need to look for alternative relief options to protect jobs. Women are the first to lose their jobs in this crisis.
The Senior Women in Business program will be extended to other countries, including Lebanon, Egypt and Algeria, after the success of the experience in Tunisia. Senior Women in Business targets a specific segment of women researchers and senior scientific entrepreneurs. The main objective of the program is to create bridges between the university and the private sector and to unleash the potential of women entrepreneurs. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Meanwhile, Egypt has moved to tame the use of three-wheeled vehicles, popularly known as tuk-tuks, by imposing a legislation on its owners. Tuk-tuk owners will now be required to either license the auto rickshaws or replace them with minivans. CGTN's Joy Kiriki Juma now reports.
The tuk-tuk, a nuisance to some as they weave through traffic on Egypt's chaotic city streets. To others, they're a cheap way to get from A to B in a fraction of time. Now, the government wants to regulate the three-wheeled motorized rickshaws by introducing a national licensing system. The government is also urging drivers to convert to natural gas-powered minibuses.
This tuk-tuk is our life and our future. We don't care about licensing. We don't care about a car worth millions. I am disabled and suffer from paralysis. I can go get a car, but it won't benefit me the way this small machine helps me. It feeds my children and feeds me.
The government says licensing tuk-tuks will help trace those responsible for accidents or crimes. It will also tame underage driving and provide drivers with insurance and a pension.
Yes, there are a lot of flaws. Children sometimes ride it. But everything has positives and negatives. The authorities previously told us to issue police license, so we issued them. That could be a solution. Or they could ask us to go register with the district and pay taxes every year. Maybe they could change the appearance of the tuk-tuk.
These licenses are granted to the owners of the tuk-tuk so that it is safe to drive on the street. Therefore, the citizen who uses the tuk-tuk will feel safe because he is riding in a vehicle that has become regulated and has a legal status, and its data is known.
Some drivers have welcomed the licensing plan. They are, however, opposed to trading in their tuk-tuks for minivans.
If they will license the tuk-tuks, then I agree. But the thing about a car, how will I pay the installments? What about the apartment rentals? I want one thing, this tuk-tuk. I'm willing to license and drive it. Everyone is pleased with the tuk-tuk. It is good, and the fare is only 5 Egyptian pounds. We take the customer everywhere. Even if the customer wants to go up the stairs, we help them carry their bags up the stairs, then help them come down, then we leave. But a minibus won't assist customers to their homes. The most they will do is let them come off at the beginning of the street.
Some residents have hailed the tuk-tuk as a blessing.
This gives us comfort when we are tired. Whenever I call him, he comes straight away and takes me wherever I want to go. If I take a car, I will have to wait for an hour or two by the time it gets here. But this is always here on the street. It's a mercy for people who are ailing, or for someone who has an errand to run, to make it to work on time, or to catch the minibus on time.
Officials estimate there may be as many as 4 million tuk-tuks in Egypt, which are either unlicensed or licensed under varying local rules. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
And before we leave you, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand leading gains across emerging market currencies. The rand rose 0.6% but was set to lose more than 2% this week. That's after a wave of violence tore across major financial hubs in the country. The currency was the worst performing emerging market unit this week. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo.